Okay, this is part 3 on our video series of exponents. Please make sure you have your video notes so that you can follow along as we go through the video. Pause when necessary so that you can stay caught up. If you don't have your notes, make sure you jot these down in your journal. Okay, beware. The base is only what is directly in front of the power. In order for a negative symbol to be included in the base, it must be grouped within parentheses. Okay, if we have negative 2 to the 4th, I always think about what is the exponent touching. The exponent is only touching the 2, so only the 2 is going to be repeated. And since our exponent is 4, we're going to repeat it 4 times. So this is really negative 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. And 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16. And then it's a negative. So this is a negative 16. Here, the exponent 4 is touching what? It's touching the parentheses. So whatever is inside the parentheses is what's being repeated. So I'm repeating negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. And negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4. A positive 4 times a negative 2 is a negative 8. And a negative 8 times a negative 2 is a positive 16. Okay, so you can see the difference in your answers. 2 to the 4th power will always equal 16. But it all depends on where your negative symbol is at. If the exponent is touching only the 2 and not the negative, then your answer is always going to be a negative. If the exponent is touching the parentheses itself, then it's what's inside the parentheses that's being repeated. And in this case, this would be a positive 16. So be very careful. Let's try a couple examples. Negative 1 to the 9th power. So if I expand this, what am I repeating? Well, take a look at your exponent. What is it touching? It's touching the parentheses. So I'm really doing negative 1 times negative 1. How many times? 9 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 times. And then you would do the math. Of course, we know 1 times itself, however many times, is going to equal 1. So it really comes down to, is this a positive or a negative 1? If we have a negative times a negative will give us a positive, and a positive times a negative gives us a negative. Times a negative is a positive. Times a negative is a negative. Times a negative is a positive. Times a negative is a negative. Times a negative is a positive. Times a negative is a negative. So it is a negative 1. And that can get really confusing. So I'm going to give you a hint. This only works with negative numbers. Okay? If your base is negative. If the exponent is an odd number, if the exponent's odd, then the answer is going to be negative. If the exponent is even, if we had taken this off and we had negative 1 to the 8th power, then our answer would have been a positive 1. Okay? That only works if the negative symbol is included or is part of your base. It's not going to work here because this negative is not part of our base, is it? The exponent is only touching the 3. It's not touching the negative because it's not inside parentheses. So this is really a negative, and then what's being repeated is a 3. 3 times 3 times 3. And 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. So it's really a negative 27. Okay, here the exponent is touching the parentheses, so everything inside the parentheses is being repeated. So it's negative 2/3 times negative 2/3 times a negative 2/3 times a negative 2/3. Because the negative symbol is included in the base, we can use our trick. Our exponent is an even number, so that means our answer is going to be a positive. And if you recall, to multiply with fractions, we just multiply the numerators. 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 2 is 16. And do the same with your denominators. 3 times 3 is 9, 9 times 3 is 27, and 27 times 3 is 81. So we get 1681. It's a positive. Okay, now you're ready for your independent practice.